Hey everybody, welcome back to Jersey First TV and our candidate forum. I'm Elizabeth Nader with my co-host Jaleh Teymourian, and we are happy to welcome Senator Holly Schepisi with us tonight. Senator, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you part of this forum. We are doing two separate interviews, so we look to interview your competitor as well. You, of course, are Senator from District 39, and the election is next week. So we are doing these two separate interviews, but they'll be similar in length. We're going to ask the same number of questions and try to give you both the same amount of opportunities to address your constituents. So before we start with your 2-minute opening, Senator, I want to just quickly read your bio, if I may. So Senator Holly Schepisi is senator for New Jersey's 39th district, covering portions of Bergen and Passaic counties. She serves on two committees in the Senate, the Labor Committee and the Health, Human Services, and Seniors Committee. Before her term in the Senate, she served in the State Assembly from 2020 to 21. Do I have that right? 1 year?
I apologize. I was in the assembly from 2012.
There, 2012. Okay, that's a typo. Thank you. I thought it was longer than that. That's why I stopped myself. There you spent a year as a deputy Republican leader. When you're not in the Senate, you, of course, work at your law firm, and you received your undergraduate education from the Catholic University of America before getting your law degree at Fordham University. You live in Rivervale with your husband and two children. So I know there's more to it, but there's your quick bio. So Senator, if you would please go ahead and just start with an intro for all the listeners.
Hi, I'm Holly Schepisi, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of representing the 39th District since 2012 as the Assemblywoman, and I became the first woman to ever be a senator for this district on March 25th of 2021. It's been a very surreal time for those that we represent. The past 19 months a lot of people have lived a lot of life. We have been one of the sole governmental offices up here that's been open throughout the entire pandemic. We've helped thousands of residents with everything from unemployment claims to our small businesses, nursing home concerns. And it really gave a different perspective on the challenges that people are facing and will continue to face as a result of the pandemic, the shutdowns, and legislatively what we need to do to try to help out. I think very few people understand that almost 40% of our small businesses in the state have closed their doors for good as a result of the shutdowns that took place over the past 19 months. And a majority of those businesses were owned by women and minorities. So as a breadwinner in my household, as somebody who worked, who was also trying to teach my children's school as they learned remotely, I really gained a much different perspective, I think, than most people on what we need to do moving forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we will move forward with the first question from Jaleh. Would you please go ahead with your question? 3-minute response roughly, Senator, please.
Okay.
Sure. So, Senator, the governor recently announced the new Return and Earn program, which uses American Rescue Plan funds to give underemployed or unemployed workers $500 to go back to work for a company that has 100 or fewer employees, so small businesses, as well as pay employers $10,000 in wage subsidies for new employee training and hiring, provided they are paid at least $15 an hour minimum. Do you support this plan as a means to get New Jersey back to work and to help support small businesses?
I think only in New Jersey could we have implemented something that would have caused such a labor shortage and our businesses to go under for such an extended period of time, and then have to try to incentivize people to come back to work. Right now, I'll support any reasonable measure that actually gets employees back into are small businesses. If you go Main Street, if you go around and talk to anybody, that's the biggest issue we are facing right now. Businesses are struggling. They can't get people to come back in. It's not even a function of wages at this point because everybody's already offering $15 an hour or higher. But because of the length and the amount of time for the additional monies for unemployment, a lot of people just decided not to go back. And it's hurting large employers, it's hurting small employers. So I think it's something that we need to come up with a bipartisan solution on to get people back into employment.
So what do you see as the solution to getting people back into? I mean, what would be in your, like your ideal solution?
Well, our ideal solution at this point is now that we're no longer continuing unemployment, I think people are going to be motivated to search for jobs. We need to ensure that at our schools or local community colleges that we have job training programs that are very robust right now. A lot of people decided as they sat home, maybe I don't like what I do, and so I don't want to go back. That's fine, that's okay, but we now need to, retrain people to get them back into the workforce. And we're finding in skilled trades, we're finding in a whole host of different types of labor shortage groups that we just don't have skilled workers able to go back in. I also think that as we do these vaccine passports and mandates, it's going to create some issues for different types of employment as well that we're going to have to address as it comes up over the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I want to talk to you about the COVID response a little bit more. You mentioned a lot of this in your intro. So many businesses have closed, not to ever reopen, sadly. So many children hurting, families hurting, schools have been closed for an extended period of time. We have had a lot happen to us in 19 months in this state. What do we need now moving forward to start to correct a lot of those wrongs? How do we reach all of these hurting people in New Jersey, in business, at home, students? What are the top things that you want to do now to correct the ship?
And there's so many facets. I think we could speak for like an hour just on this. But moving forward, one, we need to limit executive powers, especially during an emergency. We are a co-equal branch of government, and we should have been empowered to govern throughout the pandemic. And the legislature essentially just gave up all of its authority to one person, the governor, to make unilateral decisions with no discussion. In order to get our economy back, we need to cut taxes and cut regulations on small businesses and make New Jersey more competitive economically by incentivizing investment in New Jersey. We did the polar opposite. In the middle of COVID and the dark of the night, we raised our corporate business tax unnecessarily to the highest in the entire nation. That's not helping businesses get back on their feet. Another thing that the governor did, rather than utilize some of the government funding, like all of our other neighboring states did, to offset the unemployment issue for small businesses, he instead has raised taxes on all of these small businesses once again by making them pay in additional monies into unemployment. So these are things that are harming our recovery.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you, Senator. Jaleh, go ahead.
So speaking of taxes, I want to talk about property taxes. When we moved to New Jersey, our thought was, okay, well, the property taxes are high, but at least they're income tax deductible, which we know they're no longer as a result of the Republican tax plan that came out. So the gubernatorial candidate for the Republican Party for our state has proposed a flatter, more equitable distribution of state aid to schools that appears to be just simply a rebranding of Chris Christie's 2016 plan. But critics say a flat amount would make it impossible for poor communities to provide a sound education for disadvantaged children who need classrooms with more resources. And the state is required by law to send more money to these communities because they simply don't have the tax base or property values to raise additional revenues on their own. And that a flat tax would violate the New Jersey Supreme Court's 1990 ruling that New Jersey was bound by the state constitution to fund districts at a level that allow children to receive an education that enables them to participate in the economy and a democratic society. So how would if you support this, a flatter tax, how would that not be a violation of this mandate?
Well, with respect to the mandate, I think a lot of it is antiquated at this point. You have places like Hoboken, which has the highest per capita number of millionaires in the state of New Jersey, still receiving an allocation of school funding under these old concepts that is 10 to 20 times the amount of any district that I represent. So one of the things we have to do to help stabilize some of the property tax stuff, particularly in our smaller communities in Bergen, is to take special needs funding out of our budgets. Take special needs funding, put that at the state level, allocate a set amount to every child in the state who has certain special needs allocations. And that will really help a lot of our municipal school boards in trying to figure out how to appropriately fund their school budgets. You have places like Asbury Park where most people I know these days couldn't afford to move to Asbury Park with all of the development that's taken place. Asbury Park is still receiving close to $40,000 per student per year in state aid from the state of New Jersey, and is spending, I believe it's like $42,000 a year. And it was done to ensure that we never get out of it, because all of the new development that's taken place in Asbury Park has been done pursuant to pilot agreements, payment in lieu of tax agreements. Same thing happened in Jersey City, same thing happened in Hoboken. And so you have these luxury developments taking place all throughout the state in areas that are still receiving significant amounts of state aid, to the detriment of all of the other communities where property taxes will not have to be paid, commensurate with anybody else, for upwards of 30 years, with no monies going into the school systems in those communities because of this use it or lose it. And, we can afford to do this because we're getting so much money from the state, and we will have to in perpetuity, that we are not going to make our developers pay property taxes or pay school taxes. So these are things that are broken in the state. These are things that absolutely need to be fixed. And it's unfair that a place like Rivervale, New Jersey, or Westwood, New Jersey is paying 60-70% of their property taxes in order for their kids to attend school, while throughout the rest of the state, people are paying maybe 5 or 10% in property taxes towards that.
So a couple of things come to mind. One, you mentioned these sort of inequity with the developers and these sort of sweetheart deals that they've managed to sort of land for themselves in these, when they're in these luxury buildings. Why isn't there more of a push to get them to be more responsible for that burden? If they're bringing more families into the, if they're building $3-4 million places, why aren't they required to put money towards the schools and the whatever infrastructure that is extra infrastructure that's going to be needed? And second, the idea of removing special education funding and putting it at the state level, that seems like a blunt instrument, because there are students who are, have varying levels of special needs. So you may have a kid who is has a slight learning disability versus one who is, nonverbal, severely impaired, and they don't need the same level of funding. So how does that work for those students? And how does that make a situation where, you've got two kids getting the same amount, but one is, desperately in need of more services?
Okay, to address the first one, happy you brought it up. I've actually sponsored numerous pieces of legislation to limit the pilot agreements in the state. I have bipartisan support on some of those bills. Democratic leadership has refused to move some of this stuff forward, and I may continue to push and fight to do so. With respect to the special needs funding, I think I may not have been clear enough. I'm not saying that any child, regardless of what that special need may be, is all put into a pool receiving the same allocation of funds. That wouldn't be appropriate. And somebody who has nonverbal severe autism has much different needs than a child who may be dyslexic. It's more a function of creating kind of a tiered approach with a base amount for a child based upon what that special need is. And I think it would also help out parents, it would help out students, and it would help out our schools ultimately. Right now, schools are incentivized to actually litigate and fight parents who have children with special needs because the costs associated are so great. And oftentimes a parent is trying to send a child out of district to a school that is more appropriately aligned with the special need that their child may have. There are huge costs associated with it, everything from transportation to aids to you name it. And the costs sometimes are too large for a school to be able to absorb, so they fight it. This would actually help out all of the areas, including taxes. I see I'm out of time. Sorry.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for thank you for completing your thought. Part of property taxes obviously is overspending. So we need to address spending in Trenton. And this summer, the budget came out, and I believe I heard you had 11 hours to look at it. This really speaks to the balance of power that you talked about before. How do Republicans, how does the minority party get anything done in this scenario? And should Murphy win re-election, what are our chances? What is the plan going forward for us to finally be able to bring legislation to bear? How do you approach such inequity in the branches of government?
Great question. Once there's a tax in place, you never have anybody on the other side of the aisle who's motivated to actually eliminate it. And I think we see that right now with the lack of ability of our entire Democratic congressional delegation for New Jersey and the governor who just campaigned with Joe Biden side by side, who had all pledged that we would eliminate the SALT cap. And there's no movement taking place on that whatsoever, nor does anybody believe that that's actually going to occur. So here now, New Jersey is not going to get the benefit of having that cap removed. Our property taxes and our other taxes continue to increase because we have a spending problem. We have gone up, our budget has gone up $11 billion in the first 4 years that the governor has been there. And with that, our taxes have continued to climb for pretty much everything that we do in this state. So it's one of those things where everybody talks about the middle class, and I'm sorry, we have a fire alarm going off, but everybody talks about the middle class in New Jersey and small businesses in New Jersey. And these are regressive taxes that are harming each and every one of the members of the population that we're claiming to try to help. So it's something that we need to rein in state government spending. We need to cut taxes. We need to get our spending in check.
Well, it's urgent, as you hear from the alarm in the background.
Yes.
We're just going to go with that. All right. I don't have a follow-up. Go ahead, Jaleh.
So I wanted to ask about the environment. The effects of climate change and our changing weather patterns have come sharply into focus with the devastation of the floods from Ida last month. And, just look at the weather this week. But developers have been building homes in areas at high risk for flooding at an unprecedented rate since Superstorm Sandy, requiring since then continued bailouts by FEMA and other flood remediation funds. But Murphy's administration proposes enacting stricter regulations governing development in flood zones. And would you support such regulations?
Well, it depends upon what the regulations are going to be. I find that a lot of this is smoke screen and virtue signaling in this state. We are the most densely populated state in the nation. We have, had the worst COVID impact because we are the most densely populated state in the nation. And the one thing that my Democratic colleagues, who all claim that they care about the environment, have refused to do is move forward any sort of sensible legislation that would allow municipalities to take into consideration environmental issues, flooding, infrastructure, and things that you think they care about, because our communities are being forced to build high density housing under legal decisions and auspices of affordable housing. Talking about the pilot agreements, talking about the environment, it all ties in together. So we have every community in this state, including significantly flood-prone communities, that are being forced, pursuant to settlement agreements, to have to allow hundreds of units of luxury rental housing to be built in their communities with no regard to the environment. And so we can have a small set aside of maybe 10 to 15% of affordable rental units. It's the most nonsensical policy in the state. I support the effort to get to renewables. I believe in climate change. I believe in science, but we are building on every last available inch of land in this state, and my Democratic counterparts refuse to address it. And anytime I bring this up, it gets moved into some discussion of, I don't want people living in my backyard, or some other nonsense cliche of the day. This is really about, it's one of the largest issues impacting the environment in New Jersey that we are turning a blind eye to.
So does that mean that you do support regulations against building? I'm not sure. I don't quite understand.
I believe that municipalities have to have the power and authority, as these mandates are being thrust upon them by courts, by Fair Share Housing, and by the state of New Jersey, that they must be able to take into account environmental considerations within their communities. It's absurd that you have a place like Westwood, New Jersey, that I represent, that had to go out and spend millions upon millions of dollars to buy flood-prone properties because there's no place for the groundwater to go anymore, as they simultaneously have to evaluate potentially allowing hundreds of units of new housing because of affordability. It makes no sense.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of more mandates, I want to talk to you about the mask mandate, the mandating of our children, and also potential for vaccine mandates. We recently heard that perhaps that is a plan of Governor Murphy should he win re-election. So the first part of the question is, where do you stand on the mask mandates, and also specifically for children, as well as a potential vaccine mandate?
Okay. I am personally vaccinated. My husband's vaccinated. My 18-year-old daughter is. While I have been pro-vaccination and I've encouraged people to do it, I'm adamantly against government mandates that are making people lose their jobs, that made yesterday's heroes now today's villains. I think it's discriminatory, and I think we're creating multiple classes of people. That being said, I don't think it's will Governor Murphy potentially make vaccine mandates and vaccine passports? Something happened today in the State House that indicates it is 100% that that's what's going to occur. It was a precursor. We received notice this morning that a new policy has been put forth that nobody can enter the State House, including members of the legislature, unless you are vaccinated, show ID, or have a negative COVID test within 72 hours prior to appearing. It's going to hinder the ability of people who may object to vaccines from ever testifying, because the agendas oftentimes don't get posted until 48 hours prior to a hearing. So it's going to make it impossible for somebody to get tested. So, and not only do you have to show your ID, you have to show your proof of vaccination, and you have to have the two match up. So it's absolutely, the first step of that moving forward. For masks, as a mother whose child was out of school and did not have a full day of school in 545 days from third grade to fifth grade, I was willing to have him masked if that meant for him to go back. When I saw the most recent executive order mandating that 2-year-olds in preschool have to wear masks, it's absurd. And it flies in the face of even guidelines put forth by the World Health Organization, which has specifically stated that children under the age of 5 should not be mandated to wear a mask for an extended period of time because psychosocial issues, developmental issues, and a whole host of stuff. So here we are at a point in time where we're actually better with COVID in the state than we've been in the past 19 months. And these harsher, more draconian things keep coming down with no public discourse, no information, even to members of the legislature, as to what the genesis of these policies are, other than because I said so.
Okay, let me ask you a follow-up then to that, Senator. As you probably well remember, a bill to remove the religious exemption for vaccines as well as tighten the medical exemption was fought back in January of 2020. That bill was reintroduced the next day of the new session, so it's sitting there. What is your position on removing the RE and tightening the medical exemption? And if that comes to the floor, what would your vote be?
I'm a no on it. I was a no on it last time. People don't understand that it not only does it remove religious exemptions, but it makes it virtually impossible to get a medical exemption. And anybody who's ever attempted to get a medical exemption can tell you it's almost impossible to begin with to get one. You couple that with, there was language in the bill that enables unilaterally the governor at the Department of Health to add anything to that vaccine schedule that they want to in the future, and it doesn't come back to the legislature. So, today we're talking COVID vaccines. Tomorrow we could be talking Gardasil vaccines, which your child will not be able to attend school unless they get whatever the vaccine of the day may be. So while I'm pro-vaccine, while I encourage people to do it, while my own children have each of those vaccines, I don't think it's a reasonable policy to exclude children from being able to be educated when there's such a small percentage of children who aren't vaccinated.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, that was our last question. If you would please give us a roughly 2-minute close to the constituents, please.
I am here working day and night throughout past year and a half. And prior to that, my staff, myself, we've been on call 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14 hours a day for what is a part-time job. I am a mother. I am a small business owner. I am somebody who has navigated through a lot of life issues myself. I stay in New Jersey because this is where I was born. This is where I've raised my children. My family is here. I love the state. We cannot continue going down this pathway. I love California's weather. It's a beautiful state. I do not want New Jersey to be the California of the East Coast. I want my children to be able to come back and afford to live in this state. I want small businesses to be able to grow and thrive. I want women to be able to support their children and not have to work 2-3 jobs per day because the cost of living and their property taxes have gone so out of control that they feel that they can either pay their mortgage or their property taxes. We are at a real, a breaking point in this state. If you care about freedom, if you care about medical choice, if you care about small businesses, vote Republican, vote for me, vote for my entire ticket, and vote for Jack Ciattarelli. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. Jaleh, thank you so much for helping us out with this. And to everyone listening, early voting is already with us. It started last Saturday. So vote, either vote now up until the 1st. Polls are closed on the 1st, or you can vote traditionally as you would in the past at the polls on Tuesday, November 2nd. But if you don't vote, you can't complain. So if you want to keep complaining, go vote. Senator, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Best of luck to you and to our audience. We'll see you all soon. Have